Welcome to the webinar on funding and communications. This webinar will provide you with funding opportunities and communication tools that can help your watershed organization accomplish its goals. I'm Autumn Crow with West Virginia Rivers Coalition, and I'll be moderating this webinar. We also have as presenters Martin Christ from the Basin Coordinator for the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection Watershed Improvement Branch, and he will explain 319 grants and additional grant opportunities through the DEP. Then Kathleen Tyner, the Communications Director at West Virginia Rivers Coalition, will provide an overview of free and low-cost communication tools that you can use to reach your current members and attract future supporters. This free webinar is part of the West Virginia Rivers Coalition Capacity Building Webinar Series for watershed organizations. Before we get started, I'd just like to go over a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded and will be sent to you so you can download it for reference following the live version. We'll have a question and answer session following the presentations where Martin and Kathleen will be answering your questions at the end of the webinar. You'll see on the right-hand side of your screen, there's the control panel. So you can type your questions at any time into the chat box, and we'll be able to read those questions at the end of the presentations. You'll also receive a short survey following the completion of the webinar. Please take a few minutes to let us know how useful this information is and if there's anything else that we could do to improve the webinar series. With that, I will turn it over to Martin to discuss funding opportunities with DEP.
Thank you very much, Autumn. So my overarching topic is mostly resources available in the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection Watershed Improvement Branch. And we call it WIB sometimes. But a large focus is going to be 319 funding. And these animations may make me curse because I thought I took them out. I thought I took that out too. I have the wrong presentation. Yes. So sorry. No, that wasn't what I wanted. All right, here we go again. This is from the home page of the Watershed Improvement Branch, and each of those pictures represents one of the programs in the Watershed Improvement Branch. 4 of them have financial resources. They give money, and 2 of them have technical resources. People from the Watershed Improvement Branch come and help you, tell you things and help you do things. The ones with, the people don't like the DEP website. Often it's hard to find things. There are 3 ways to find WIB. There's sort of this shortcut with Go. There's the exact URL. And then if you use common sense and try to navigate through the website, you go to water and then look for the word watershed management, and WIB is under there. Watershed management is sort of the tricky one. Okay, these are the programs in WIB that do not give out money. They are the Save Our Streams program. That's where somebody will come teach you about monitoring with some emphasis on benthic macroinvertebrates. And then the WET program, Water Education for Teachers. There's a fairly streamlined way to put together water festivals for kids and get prospective teachers involved. These are the programs that do give out money. The first is the Stream Partners Program. It has $5,000 grants for watershed groups. Applications are due every September 15th, and those grants run for 1 calendar year. The Chesapeake Bay program is for people in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, of course, and it's funding to assist in things that are described in the watershed implementation plan for West Virginia's part of the Chesapeake. The in lieu fee program is kind of complicated. It has mostly gone for physical restoration of streams and some stream protection. And to find out more, we'll have a link at the end. And then there's the non-point source program, which is Section 319 of the Clean Water Act. It supports those things, but it also supports big construction projects. Basically, well, let me go on from there. The non-point source program, I'm including with that the AGO grants program, which I'll talk about. Okay, non-point source program comes from Section 319 of the Clean Water Act, and it is sort of embedded in a whole chain of steps related to the Clean Water Act. The basic idea is that the non-point source program gives funding to states to support construction of best management practices that reduce non-point source pollution. Okay, and this bulleted list here is the different steps that it's embedded in. Sorry about that. First of all, we don't protect streams as if they're citizens, like they have rights. What they have are designated uses, and we have standards to protect those designated uses. When their water quality violates those standards, we put them on a list of impaired streams. Then we figure out how to unimpair them, how to fix them. And the way we do that is we do a total maximum daily load analysis. And that tells you how much each stream can receive before it is impaired. Once that's done, if you want to fix the stream, you write a watershed-based plan, and we'll talk about that. Once a watershed-based plan is approved, there are project proposals. If the project proposals are funded, then you have the issue of getting it done. But wait, there's more that refers to a few other hoops that need to be jumped through. Okay, so these are criteria. These are the standards that streams should meet in order to support all their designated uses. For example, you see that for pH, there's the designated use of supporting aquatic life and water contact recreation and public water supply. To support those uses, pH must be between 6 and 9. And you can see that there are a lot of standards. This is just fecal coliform and acid mine drainage, really. But if you go to the standards, and there's a link to those, you can find several pages of other standards. 303D is the piece of the Clean Water Act that specifies that states have to make lists of their waters that are impaired. In West Virginia, it's called the West Virginia Integrated Water Quality Monitoring and Assessment Report. It's a little tricky to read. The 303D list is officially the new impairments found during the current cycle, but in the document, you'll find lots of appendices where all the other impaired streams from years gone by are listed. DEP calls for data to compile this list every 2 years. And if you want to improve a stream, but you don't see it on the list, you should submit data to show that it's worth working on. TMDL is it's probably one of the most complex of this. Again, it stands for total maximum daily load. And the idea is how much pollution can a reach of stream receive before it's impaired. It's required by the Clean Water Act. And if you want to restore a stream, the idea is to take the load that is currently in a stream down from what it is to its allocated load. And an important thing to think about is that these are created for really small watersheds. So for instance, the average watershed that has a load allocation in the cheap watershed TMDL is 2,000 acres, and the target at 1,700 acres. So, you know, a stream coming out of that little watershed, you really should be able to see an impact on. And this equation here, TMDL, the total maximum daily load, is the waste load allocation, the load allocation, and a margin of safety. Waste load allocation, that's really the point source discharges. The load allocation is the non-point source discharges, and the margin of safety is just what it sounds like. Okay, after a TMDL, you need a watershed-based plan. This diagram on the right is often presented with watershed-based plan, and it's good points, but I think what I'd like you to know about the watershed-based plan is that it really is a common sense approach. The question is, what are you going to do? What projects are you going to do to make this watershed support all its designated uses, to reduce those loads described in the TMDL? So you need to define the problem, in other words, say what the impairments are, and make a list of projects that will fix the problem. And then using an understanding of the source loads and the in-stream loads, convince the reader that the projects will actually do the job. Then sort out the costs and write a budget and write a timeline and add some outreach and education. We have a list of elements in a watershed-based plan that I also have a link to. So there's a lot of conditions. This is about projects now. When you actually apply for a project, the money is reimbursable. It doesn't come to you up front, but you spend it and then show that you spent it and then get it reimbursed. A maximum of 60% of the projects come from the 319 fund, 40% has to come from someplace else. 10% can go towards operating costs. I should change administration to operating costs. And the projects must be related to non-point source water quality issues. These projects get big. They get to be 300,000 or more. This picture here is of a Friends of Cheat project, and you can see that it took a lot of excavation and a lot of earth moving and a lot of bringing in material like limestone to make it happen. And this one was done very efficiently and did not hit 300,000, I don't think. Okay, some words about executing a plan. Once a watershed-based plan is approved, you can apply for these grants that I was talking about and do the projects as you proposed. Neither EPA nor WIB like to see plans just sit around. It is a triumph to get a plan approved, but it's not the triumph that we are going for in the end. What we're going for in the end are success stories. We want to be able to tell everybody this stream was impaired and now it's not. It didn't have fish, now it does. Or we want to be able to tell people, hey, this stream carried a load of 10,000 pounds a year of iron last year, but now we've done the project and it's down to 1,000 pounds a year. It may still be impaired, but it's certainly improved. And again, it's limited to 60%. So we have a few divisions of our funding. What I've talked about is there in the middle, watershed project grants. There are also non-point source program grants. They do things like help you develop a watershed-based plan. And then there are the additional grant opportunities. This is a short version of the timeline for the watershed project grants. So they're all assigned to a particular federal fiscal year. So right now it's 2018, and the deadline for projects for 2019, fiscal year 2019, is May 1st. What happens after you turn it in on May 1st is first you iterate with WIB. We go back and forth and talk about tweaking the writing to make it fit better. Then around August, we send it to EPA, and then there's another source of iterating. EPA tells WIB, this doesn't look quite right, and we'll go back and forth with you to make it better. The money may be available in 2019, so you submit your proposal, do a little bit of iterating, and then hurry up and wait for 14 months or 15 months, or more or less. It depends a lot on what happens in Washington, D.C. The target deadline for a project is usually in X+3. So if you're applying now for 2019 funds, probably we'd all like to see the project done by September 30th, 2022. The absolute drop dead deadline would be 2023 in year +4, so 2023. And then, as I said, but wait, there's more. Before we do business, we have to complete a financial history review, and procurement procedures are a big part of that and a difficult part of that. Grants cover 60%. Other 40% must come from someplace else. For acid mine drainage, it's often from the Office of Surface Mining. For smaller projects, it's often in-kind work. And also tell us your need, and we may be able to come up with something. There used to be a fund that helped, but that isn't really around anymore. Money is reimbursed, not upfront. There are reporting requirements, semi-annual reports twice a year, and a final report is also required. If you are collecting data, you need to prepare a quality assurance project plan, and you must submit the data to an EPA database through us. Again, 10% is allowed for operations costs, and then another thing that you've got to do is prepare a contingency plan. This came out of the Gold King mine thing in Colorado. You have to write if there's any chance for some kind of disaster to happen and what you're going to do if it does. And often, you know, there's not a lot of water impounded on a site. So it's not really, you can write that we think everything is a pretty low risk. Okay, the AGO program is sort of like NASA tried to do satellites starting in 1990, cheaper and faster. They're smaller projects, but, and you have less time, but there's no reason they should take 3 or 4 years. There's no set schedule. You have to watch our communications for announcements, but the reporting requirements are the same. This is the links which you can download through along with this PowerPoint, and then questions, which we'll take after Kathleen. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Let me get my slideshow going. So, like Autumn said, I am Kathleen Tyner. I am the Communications Director for West Virginia Rivers Coalition. And today, I am really excited to share with you some tools that you can use to set up the infrastructure to become a really effective communicator. I'll be focusing on low cost and free tools, and I'll be demoing 3 of them. And if I have a few minutes at the end, I have a couple more tools I just want to bring to your attention. So Autumn, I have 3 poll questions I'd like to launch before I get started.
So if you can just respond to the poll that you see come up on your screen. And we'll close it in about 15 seconds. So get your responses in.
And these answers will help me know what weight to give different tools and different content in this webinar.
Okay, so it looks like 50% are using Excel spreadsheets, 17% of the responses are using a local database or Microsoft Access, and 33% of the responses are not using anything.
Okay.
Next poll. We'll leave it open for another 15 seconds.
Okay.
So it looks like it's 50-50.
Okay. And we have one more question.
Here's the next poll. We'll give you another 15 seconds, and then I'll close it. And it looks like the top method is social media.
All right. Thanks for that, Autumn. So those answers really do help me figure out how I want to weight what we talk about in this webinar. So I have to admit, I am a little excited to hear that only not very many of you are using a real database, and you're using a lot of Excel files, because what I want to spend some time talking about is your communications plan foundation, which is your organizational database. And a quick definition of a database: it is your comprehensive and centralized system where you're keeping track of your organizational contacts and their engagement with your organization. And a quick acronym that sometimes gets thrown around with databases is a CRM, and that stands for Constituent Relationship Management. And the key in that is relationship. Databases are all about helping you get to know your supporters, so you can make decisions that will help improve your communications. And just as important as what a database is what a database isn't. It's not a Rolodex, so you really need to resist the urge to think about it as just a warehouse of information. Your database is dynamic, and the information you're collecting in there tells a story. So you need to think of it as a dynamic tool that can help you, not just a warehouse of information. So a little bit on data and communications, why it's so important to have a database. Your database is going to help you do three main things which will improve your communications. It's going to help you get to know your supporter. You'll collect information like where do they live, what type of fundraising asks are they responding to, are they married, do they volunteer their time. All that information your database will be able to tell you. And once you start collecting that information, you can organize. So you can divide your database contacts into records like donors, non-donors, volunteers. And you can keep track of what type of communications you're sending them. Are you sending them your year-end appeal? Are they on your email list? All of that information is collected and organized in meaningful ways. So once you've organized it, you can evaluate. So what's working, what isn't working? Do you have an appeal letter that had a really high response rate? If you do, you want to check it out, see why it was so great, and see if you can do that again, recreate that success based on what you're learning off of your database. And my final thing I want to leave you with to back up why you need a database to advise your communications is the statistic. 77% of donors will leave an organization due to lack of communication. So you have to have a database so you can keep track of who you're communicating with and when you're communicating with them. And if you're keeping track of that, you're going to retain more donors and have an increased active membership. So data is scary, and if you have a bunch of Excel spreadsheets, and this webinar encourages you to take the leap and start with an organizational database, or really want to try email marketing and really becoming more sophisticated with how you communicate, you're going to want to focus on the quality and not quantity of your records. So if you have an Excel spreadsheet with 500 names on it, and you want to start sending them a monthly e-newsletter, but 300 of those email addresses have typos or are old information, you don't want to use that. With email marketing, it's extremely important that you have valid and accurate information, because if your email ends up in too many spam boxes, your domain, so for instance, wrivers.org, could get marked as spam in email clients like Gmail. And once that happens, there's really no turning back. You're in big trouble. So you want to make sure you're always using accurate data. And if you have accurate data, your communications are going to succeed, and the way you collect and understand data will succeed. So after this webinar, I hope you're all super excited to start researching communications tools on your own. But there's a couple things you want to pay attention to, especially on the watch out list. So sometimes tools will introduce a really low introductory price that sounds fantastic. But once you look into it, you realize you have to have add-ons. And add-ons are essentially additional functionality. So that could be a sign-up list for your email or online donation page. So you want to make sure the price that's quoted to you is transparent and it includes everything you need. The other big caution is drastic price increases when you grow. So I want to show you an example here. This is MailChimp's, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, pricing schedule for introductory rates. They are super generous with folks wanting to start out with email marketing, 2,000 subscribers, 12,000 emails a month. That's really generous and really fantastic, and for most folks, that's enough. But if you start needing to have unlimited emails, so if you're sending more than 6 e-news a month to all your subscribers, you'd have to pay. But what I really want to show you is under the 2,500 to 2,600, so the last benchmark in there. Previously, every 499 subscribers, you're being charged an additional $5 until you hit 2,500. Then you're charged an extra $5 per 100 subscribers. And this is extremely common on your digital communications tools. So you want to pay attention to that and make sure the tool you start out with is still working for you as your organization evolves and grows. So just something to be aware of. So the first tool I want to show you all today is Little Green Light, and it is my pick for the best starter database based on its pricing and its simplicity. Little Green Light is a fully functional database. It will do your email marketing. It will do online donation pages. It will basically do everything you need from within the platform, and it's extremely affordable. $421 a year or $39 a month for up to 2,500 contacts. That is some of the best pricing you'll see for a full functioning database. It also has really powerful integrations and integrates with PayPal, MailChimp, and a host of other really common tools that folks might be using. So it's a great option. It's simple to use, no contract. You can try it for 30 days free. So you can really test drive it and see if it's something you're interested in investing in. So I actually want to show it to you real quick. And what I want to show you is how your database is going to advise your communications and how they work together. So you can see the landing page for Little Green Light here. This is my dashboard. I actually already put in some information and have a constituent. That's what they call supporters. And you can see what a constituent page looks like. You have all the basic contact information for your supporter, snapshot of their giving history, their volunteering history, quick contact information. But down at the bottom here, you see what I really want to show you. And it's how you can track engagement with your organization to advise your communications. You can see that Dilly here has donated a financial gift, an in-kind gift, and he volunteered his time. I can see what campaigns he donated to. He donated to natural gas extraction, and his in-kind gift he made at an event. I can tell it's good, so maybe it was for a raffle. And it was at an event called Pipeline Community Meeting, and it also looks like he may have tabled there. So based on that information, I can tell that if I send Dilly an appeal letter that talks about natural gas or pipelines, he's probably going to donate. Or if I have an action alert that has to deal with natural gas, Dilly is somebody that I want to make sure sees that action alert, because chances are he'll follow through. So your database is critical to understanding who your supporters are and how they're going to take action or interact with you. I've really enjoyed this demo with Little Green Light. It was extremely intuitive to set up, and I think it would be a great starter database and a low-cost option. So back to the presentation. Next tool is maybe you already feel comfortable with how you're tracking supporters and you're not ready to really invest in a new database, but you desperately need to bring new people in. And that's where Action Network comes in. And they are a nonprofit themselves. West Virginia Rivers used Action Network for a few years, and I believe we paid $10 a month for access to their platform. And that gives you tools like email marketing, online fundraising, and advocacy tools like letter campaigns and petitions. It does volunteer and events management. But the big drawback is it's all digital. So if you're doing offline fundraising or offline outreach, Action Network's not going to be able to track that for you. So you'd still need an organizational database if you're doing a lot of that offline organizing. So what I want to show you with Action Network is how clean and simple it looks and how effective it can be. So I have a demo campaign I want to show you. So we use their letter campaign tool to really build our people power. And letter campaigns are a really neat advocacy tool where your activists can click on your action alert, you provide them the information they need, they fill out their contact information. I'll do that real quick. And they can send a letter to decision makers. And the great part about this is you can decide who that decision maker is. If you want to contact state or federal legislators, they'll contact their legislator based on their address they provide on the previous page. Or you can designate what contact they'll be emailing. So Rivers found that really useful for permitting related issues. So if we have a DEP contact we want to send citizen letters to, we can tell the system who we want to send all of the letters to. So everyone would email one person. But it's really clean interface here. The letter that your organization would provide for people to send is provided. Folks can read through it. Folks can make changes to it if they want. That's great if you're working on permitting issues and you want someone to say, I'm an effective landowner and I live in X. They could add that. The best part is you can track how many letters you're sending, which funders and grants really want to know, and you're collecting full contact information for your supporters. So that's really going to help you build power. And I want to show you what it did for West Virginia Rivers. We used Action Network for 2 years, and in those 2 years, we grew our supporter list by 3,100 people. So those are new people that clicked on our advocacy campaigns, gave us all of their contact information, and care deeply about the work we're doing. So those prospects are going to be much more inclined to engage with your work moving forward and make donations to become full members. So this is a great way to simply, easily, and effectively build your lists and really help accomplish your mission. Alrighty, last tool I want to show you is MailChimp. I'm a gigantic fan of MailChimp. If your organization wants to really try email marketing, and I guess I should define that for you. Email marketing is when you are sending emails to lots of people and you want to track how they engage with it and what actions they take. That's email marketing. So MailChimp is the pro at that. They're a best in industry, best in class tool to use, and they're extremely generous with smaller users. You can have up to 2,000 subscribers and 12,000 emails a month, which is better than most tools out there. It's extremely easy to use. We'll make really gorgeous emails that are mobile responsive and will be a pleasure for your subscribers to read. And it has powerful integrations. You can integrate it with Facebook or Little Green Light and a number of other databases out there. So I want to show you just how simple it is. We get logged in here. So you can create a campaign in just a few minutes, and a campaign is another word for an email. So it gives you some options, ads, landing pages. So that's if you have like a event or something that you'd want a landing page for. So let's just talk about email. And one thing I love about MailChimp is this option right here called A/B test. Once you start email marketing and you start really using email as a tool to reach your supporters, you want to figure out what works best for your organization and start building those best management practices. An A/B test is what does that for you. It takes your campaign and splits your list you're mailing to into 2 to 3 segments. And it will mail them automatically. And those segments could be things like the two different segments will get different subject lines, or they'll receive the email on different days of the week. So you can compare those segments and see what performed better for your organization. And that's extremely powerful in terms of advising future communications. So just to do a regular email, you give it a campaign name. This is internal, and it will help you keep track. You might want to date it, whatever you need to do to understand what that email is about. And it's so simple to set it up. 2, you'll set this stuff up once you create your MailChimp account. You'll get your list added. You can select who you want to mail to. You can segment that list, and this is different from the A/B segmenting. This segmenting has to do with making sure the people you want to get the email get it. So you can do that by new subscribers. So maybe they sign up to your email list after you sent your most recent e-news, and you want to make sure they get it. It can be geography. MailChimp does really neat geocoding where it can email to people within a certain zip code range. Maybe you just want to send people that are under 35, all kinds of cool tools to segment your list so you get in front of the people that are most likely to engage with it. Set up your from, your subject. So this is different from your campaign. And if you want preview text, you can do that. If you don't do it, what will appear is just the first heading or subject of your email, so that's optional. And then it's finally time to design your email. And MailChimp comes with all these gorgeous built-in templates. These are their fancy ones. And then they have basic templates. You just select what you want. And it's literally drag and drop. It's so simple to use. You can add your photos. You'll have those all in MailChimp and organized, so you have a photo library. To change text, it's just like working in Word or your email client. Extremely easy. You can see real time what your email will look like as you're designing it. Extremely simple way to make really nice looking emails. You want to add a photo, you just drag it in and drop it. Extremely simple. So this is my pick if you really want to start email marketing and really reaching your supporters with compelling emails. So I have a few minutes, so I want to touch on 2 other tools that you might want to consider. One is Sumac, and this is your pick if you don't want to spend any money on a database, but you want to do everything in one system. So you want to try email marketing, you want to try online donation pages, and you want a database. Sumac will give that to you for free, up to 500 contacts. So if you want to dip your toe in the database world, Sumac might be a good option. The cons are pretty strong, though. It's not cloud-based. If you do want cloud access, so that means multiple people could be using it on multiple computers, you'd have to spend $25 a month, which is a pretty big drawback. And there's limited integration, so if you didn't want to use their native email marketing and you wanted to use something like MailChimp, you wouldn't be able to do that and have that information still show up in your database. But great if you really don't want to spend any money, but you want to try a database. And then my other tool is my power user tool or more advanced database tool. The reason I did not feature it is because of the price. It is much more expensive to use. Watergrass itself is a nonprofit organization, And it is a custom build on a database called Salesforce. And Salesforce is an industry-leading database that's used for nonprofits and the corporate world, and it's extremely powerful. Watergrass on top of Salesforce gives you a customized interface just for watershed organizations. So you get special fields in your database like, you know, what watershed do they live in based on their address. It's pretty neat. And Watergrass itself has designed some really great tools that you can take advantage of, like petitions, online signups, events management, volunteer management. And there are some integrations with Vertical Response, which is email marketing, and MailChimp. I have to say the MailChimp integration is not that strong, and it works, but it's not as great as it could be. So that's just something to keep in mind. And Watergrass is continually updating their system and providing new tools. Their volunteer management, they really just stepped this up in the last year. So they're constantly innovating and listening to their clients to improve the database. The biggest con is it's very expensive to set up. You're going to spend about $3,000 to $5,000 your first year. You can use a Stream Partners grant to cover that, but it's, you have to be prepared to spend a big chunk of change. After that first year, there's two different pricing plans. You can either spend $1,500 a year, where you get full support, use of the database, all kinds of assistance. And then there's a slightly cheaper plan, which is $750 a year. And that's just for use of the database, use of the upgrades, and limited support. The $750 a year is great because it is not based on the number of contacts you have. So if you start using Salesforce and your supporter list really grows, your price is never going to increase. So it's really an option if you want to pick one database and stick with it. Chances are it will be able to work with your organization for a good long time. So a couple resources. So after this webinar, you can start doing your own research. There is a free database guide and comparison from IdeaWare. It was published last year, so it's very recent. It's extremely long and really thorough, so it's a great starting point to research tools out there and start figuring out what might work for you. And then I included 3 blogs that I really like that provide webinars and trainings and kind of get into those communications best management practices. So how to create compelling social media posts, stuff like that. And of course, I'm always available if you have questions. I love to talk about this stuff and would love to hear from you if you have particular questions or are interested in how Rivers does our communications. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Kathleen. So we have about 10 minutes for questions. You can enter your questions into the chat box. And we don't have any questions yet. So if you have any questions, go ahead and enter them in, and either Kathleen or Martin is available to answer your questions. So it looks like you guys did such a good job with your presentations. Everyone knows everything they need to know. There's another way that you can ask a question. If you want to raise your hand, there's a hand raising feature. And if you raise your hand, I can unmute you and you can ask your question verbally. And if you look in the attendees, you can see there's a little hand, and that's how you raise your hand. So it looks like we don't have any questions. Oh wait, here's one. So the question is whether they will receive a copy of the presentation. And yes, this webinar is being recorded, and so you will receive a recording of the webinar that you can listen to at your convenience. And we can also share the slides with you if you'd like to have a copy of just the slides without the audio. So we have your email address, so that email will be going out to you following the webinar. And is there any other questions? Okay, here's another question. Would West Virginia Rivers be willing to help set up systems for volunteer groups if they have challenges?
Yeah, I'd love to talk to you about that and find out what exactly your challenges are and help you set up systems that you'd be able to manage and use.
Hi. I wanted to point out one of the links in my presentation.
Okay, let me change to your screen.
Oh.
Okay, your screen should be live, Martin.
Okay.
You might have to.
Got it?
There you
go. Okay, I wanted to point out this one here. I don't know if you see my mouse. Probably not.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. So this one here, basin coordinators. That's a good link to know to help get into the Watershed Improvement Branch. I am the Northern Basin Coordinator. Tommy Bergstrom is the Western Basin Coordinator. She's out of Charleston. And Alana Hartman is the Potomac Basin Coordinator, and she can help with Chesapeake Bay program questions as well. And that is a link to all of us. There's a vacancy in the Southern Basin, and we're going to be filling it or coming up with some other reorganization system. And I may have missed some of the conversation because I hit my unmute button and hit the hang up button instead.
Okay, thanks, Martin. Do we have any more questions? You can enter them into your question box, or you can raise your hand and I can unmute you. Okay, well, I think that's all of our questions. Thank you, everyone, for joining our webinar. And please remember to fill out the evaluation that you'll receive following the completion of this webinar so we can improve future webinars. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a great day.